All right, so we're back with another episode of We Need to Talk. And today I have a larger panel than normal. First, I have my wife, Kawana. I have Melissa, Pam, Shauna, Nagasti,
Hello.
Jill, Neil, Tasha,
Everybody.
and
Hi.
who am I missing? And we have a couple fellas in the room just to, balance it out so I don't get, jumped or anything once, the conversation goes a little left. So I'll start off first off. How's everybody doing this afternoon?
We're
Great.
doing good.
Good,
Great.
good, good. Just know I'll be back and forth. I love you.
All right, all right. Anybody? No, that's it. Everybody else just got quiet on me.
Absolutely wonderful, Mr. Ringo. Absolutely wonderful.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Fantastic, and thank you for having me.
I appreciate you all coming on, especially while football is on. But
The
today
Steelers are doing pretty well.
we're gonna start off the topic. We're gonna start with today is parenting or mothers raising black children, Hispanic children, during this climate with all of the madness and craziness that's going on out there. So first, I'll start off mainly talking to the women, and then after that, the males. You can jump in also, but I want to start out talking to the women since we usually don't get women on here. I do appreciate you all coming on, especially with short notice. So, our first question I'll start off with is for all of the women. Can you tell me, each of you, how many children you have and their ages?
Okay. I'll go first, I guess. So I have a 20-year-old son, a 15-year-old daughter, and a 3-year-old daughter.
I have two children, a 7-year-old daughter, and a 4-year. I was going to say three because he just turned 4. A 4-year-old son.
I have 3 children, an 18-year-old daughter, a 12-year-old daughter, and a 10-year-old son.
I have 2 children. That's a 12-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son.
I have 3 children, a 19-year-old son, a 14-year-old son, and an 8-year-old son.
I have 7 children. I have an 18-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 20-year-old, a 21-year-old, a 16-year-old, an 18-year-old, who else? And a 17-year-old. Yep, we have extended family here.
Hey, it's all good. It's all good.
Awesome. I have 3 children, a 17-year-old daughter, a 15-year-old son, and a 13-year-old daughter.
Okay. So then the first question I'll put out there I'll say for the parent, for the mothers that have daughters, seeing the way that everything is happening. I mean, honestly, who do you have your biggest fear? I want to say for. Is it your son or your daughter, or is it equal among the two?
Oh, that's a hard question.
I think for me, it's about equal, honestly, since my daughter is older right now. So that kind of presses the matter because, going out with mindset of how people are raising their children nowadays and the respect level for male and females these days is horribly uneven. So for me, my biggest, I guess, worries for both, but pressing more because, reaching the dating age and going into that stage is scary for anybody.
Yeah, I could agree with Tasha. My concern for them out here in the world probably is pertaining to their ages. So, my 13-year-old, because she's 13, I'm not as concerned because she doesn't have much interaction that doesn't include me. Whereas my 17-year-old, even though she's a girl as well, I'm a little bit more concerned for her because she is driving, getting ready to go off to college, and is getting ready to make some decisions and encounter some situations that, the word protect is loosely used, but that I'm not really there to guide her through every step of the way. Whereas my son, he's still under, my safe haven. He isn't really interacting with the world outside of someone being there to guide him.
I say I'm more concerned for my son because he's a big little boy. And I mean, even when he was born, he was so big that I did not want to put him in daycare just because I thought that people would think he was older than what he was, especially after having an experience at the hospital where they tried to give him some pain medicine when he was 3 months. And I just feel like as he gets older, as Black boys get older, they're perceived as a threat. So that concerns me just because of his size. Like he's tall.
I'm not a mother of girls, but I do see from personal experience that girls tend to be more social. And because they tend to be more social, they have a lot more experiences with or interaction with other people that can become potentially dangerous. And because I don't think that we focus, I know me growing up, I don't think that my mother focused more on, hey, you need to go out there and watch your back, with me being a female, as much as she said that to my brothers. So females are not as trained in regards to protection or trying to find certain types of respect as males are, especially in Black communities. So I would say that I'm more concerned for girls in the social aspect, but for the injustice aspect, I would be more concerned for my sons.
I would say for me, because my children are biracial, my son, I have more concern for my daughters because my son is more white passing. So I see the way that they've been treated differently from early on, especially when you consider the school system, the way they're treated. My son was definitely way more of a hellion than my daughter, but he gets passed on that where, if she does anything wrong, it's punished quickly.
Okay. And what about you, Pam? I know you have a lot of older, I want to say, children, and with your youngest being a female. But as far as the girls go and the boys, what is who are you more worried about or more concerned about? I know you're concerned and love them all, but where's your fear at for? Is it more the boys or for the girls?
I say it's equal to me because now Kendall's going to learn from me as how I grew up, and she's going to follow her mother's footsteps as growing up in the house. And as far as Eric goes, him about to go to college, and I believe he's going to make it. Even if he play over the seas, like I have to just tell him, you got to watch these females. Period. Are they going to be after your money? I just want to make sure he have his head on straight when he go to college next year. As far as the other girls go, right now they okay. They still learning. They still young teenagers, and that's why I was telling Kenny I wish they were in our household, so I can guide them more. But I just think it's equal. I'd be worried about all the kids. Yeah.
So then I guess my next question would be, as far as the coverage and stuff goes, there seems to be more focus on the men, and I think if you listen to a couple of the other episodes that I've done, Sherwin has been on, with me for pretty much all of the other episodes. But if you listen to some of the other episodes, I do make it a point to point out that women are going through, or young girls are going through the same thing that the men are going through. But do you all find it, and this is for everybody, but do you all find it a little, I want to say, disheartening that they focus mainly on the men and not so much the women, or not giving the women equal coverage as the men?
I was gonna mention that with just who I am really more concerned with. Of course, like many of you know, my oldest is in college. So I think my focus has been on her, even with a lot going on and having a Black son. my focus is more on my older child because I have an understanding, especially working in the field I work in, that she's more exposed because she is not being overlooked. She's independent now. So she's more exposed to things to happen, possibly like sexual assault, and knowing that women's outcry are not always a concern. If anything, we're thought of being lying before telling the truth, especially when it comes to our bodies. So for me, knowing that she's in a setting where she's partying and she's trying to feel out everything, that she stays and remains safe in that setting. And then also, even I have a fear for her when it comes to the fact that she's in the South. And she's in the deep South because she's in Valdosta, which is very South. It's not like Atlanta. And my fear of her interaction with people who are, you know, potentially prejudiced or racist because she's grown up in a city and not have had a lot of interactions with it, making sure she understands how to respond, which is very important because we can't, you know, help other people's actions, but we can facilitate how we respond to things that are being done to us, and understanding that although one person may respond in one way and have a certain type of consequence, that might not be yours, especially as a Black woman. So you have to make sure your response is definitely aware of exactly who you are and what your consequence may be.
Yeah, I think you bring up an excellent point, Melissa, around context, you know, and where they are, where they're living, what their surroundings are, and their own personal experience with dealing with certain issues, you know. That is a concern that I do have for mine. People often say, you're raising those suburban kids, you know, and so they don't have many opportunities to engage outside of being driven by mom, you know. And so just those challenges, having grown up in the city and knowing that I can run across any circumstance on any, could have run across any circumstance on any given day, from, you know, predators, homelessness, solicitation for drugs, you know, inappropriate police behavior, other inappropriate adults, or just peers who may have, you know, wanted to guide you in negative directions. But because with my children, a parent has always been there, if not me, another parent. The questions are not only, you know, are they able to deal with it, but that first experience, that shock to their syndrome, when they really realize that this that we've talked about hypothetically exists, you know, they may know the words, they may, you know, have had the hypothetical conversations, but will they really be able to execute it at that point, you know? And then will they know what lifelines to turn to in the event that it goes awry? Because, you know, similar to what Melissa was saying, you don't necessarily control the other person's actions. So that reaction to what you think is an appropriate action occurs, you know, the next step is, who do I call for support? You know, do I call a friend? Do I call the doctor? Do I call a lawyer? Do I call the police, a teacher? You know, who's there to help them in those scenarios? And those are a big bucket of concerns, but it is something that I try to tell them now, you know, this is who you call, but who's to say what's going to happen if and when they do come to that crossroad?
Anybody else want to add on to that?
I mean, I get the rural piece too, because when my child's just now learning how to drive, and like her driving in the city versus like her driving out my mother's, who lives out like more rural area, is a big nervous difference for me. Whereas here, I'm more concerned about her having an accident. I am concerned about the police, but not to the same extent when you go out into these places where there's Trump signs everywhere, where, you know that they don't, you know, there's not people of color that live out there. So if they're few and far between. So she stands out, and that worries me about, does that make her a target?
Okay, I mean, And anybody else want to chime in or add on to what's been said so far? Kawana, Nagasti, anybody? Or
I would say that all of my life, because of the type of neighborhood that I grew in, it's always been a fight or flight situation where we respond with fear. And whenever you respond with fear, sometimes anger comes through, or the way that you react to somebody is not the correct way to react to someone, or it makes the other person get even more malicious. So I try to train, and I have 3 sons, so I try to train them to make sure you try to calm yourself first, and respond in a way that is so nice that they don't know how to react to someone being kind, or they don't know how to react to someone walking away. So they'll try to keep nitpicking at you. And I know that I've been in certain situations. I've worked in a jail. I've worked in a shelter with homeless people. I've worked in a clinic where you have low income, and we get a lot of people who are angry all the time. And unless you teach yourself how to be empathetic of their situation, then you don't know how to respond to them, because you're not able to empathize with them. So I want them to be able to know how to put themselves in someone else's shoes and to empathize with what they might be feeling, so that they can learn how to react to them.
Okay. So now, with that being said, then I have a question for Tasha and Jill, and that question is, and I know a lot of people, and I don't think it's anybody on this panel or this group here, but with your children being mixed race children, does that give you any, I want to say, any sense of peace, knowing that, when your child goes out there, that they can, and so a lot of times will get that pass, versus, I think you said, Jill, that your son is I guess can pass for white more than the daughters can. So does that give you any, I guess, sense of relief or peace, when he's out there, or or is that fear still there exactly the same?
No, it's not exactly the same for sure. Like it's different, like when they're with me versus when they're with my husband, right?
Okay.
So like my daughter recently this week, actually, my husband and her were racing, and he accidentally ran into her and she hit the sidewalk. And the first thing I'm thinking is, like, I'm taking her to the hospital, not you, because the way you're going to be treated is going to be different than the way I'm treated. It's going to be a defects call if you walk up in there, versus like, me, they're going to consider it an accident. They're going to, I'm going to, and there's a lot of privilege that comes with being white in this country, hell, the world probably. And so I know that, and yeah, I mean, like, there's been times where I've gone and looked at houses, and when I first go look, I don't take my husband, because I know the treatment's going to be different. And so, yeah, it's definitely, I mean, I feel like for my son, I don't have to worry as much. I know that he's gotten in trouble, it's been kind of played down. Whereas if my daughter does something, like even with school, she's held to like such a different standard. It's just.
And I mean, and at least for me, and then Tasha, I want to get your response on that too. But it's good to hear you say that, because I think a lot of times people would tend to shy away from that, or go, no, it's exactly the same. But it's good to hear you say that, because it's honest feedback that I think people need to hear. And I mean, frankly, it's the truth. Is you don't want to look at it and say, oh well, I know they're going to be both treated the same, and then act shocked when they're not treated the same. Because like you said, if your husband would have taken her to the hospital, it would have been instead of maybe a 4-hour process, it might have turned into 6 or 7, because of him showing up. And then, like I said, they could have looked at it as a domestic incident or something along those lines.
Yeah, for sure there's a difference. I mean, I remember even being young, and my foster sister is Black, being, we were stealing from the store, and I'm the one being out with the cop, and she's the one who gets arrested, and I'm the one who gets told to go home to my real family. So, I mean, there is a huge a huge difference. And I think some people know that and live off of it and enjoy the fact that there's a difference. And then I think there's some people who just are so blind to it. And then there's some people who are uncomfortable about having that conversation. So they just try to be blind to it when they're not.
Okay. Thank you, Jill. Um, Tasha, what about you?
Um, I constantly think about it, honestly. And perspective makes the biggest difference. Labels make a huge difference. And um, because I am, as the female in a relationship, it's like um, having a white male versus the way Jill's situation is. And like, I don't say white people or Black people. I've tried to, I say ebony and ivory, because it's like for me, I'm trying to find, I guess, a better balance because I'm not dark. And so because of the mixing, like the children didn't turn out dark. So they're not viewed as ivory people either. They're obviously mixed, but nobody can usually tell unless their dad is with them. So the conversations that I'm having to have with them is trying to find that balance about not ignoring the fact that because you have cornrows, people are going to look at you a certain way. Or when you're with your mom, people are going to look at you a certain way. Like that's a conversation that needs to be had. But at the same time, it's like, I don't want them to view it as it being a bad thing or feeling like they're going to be attacked when they leave the house, because the difference is pretty much what Kwana was saying about people will view you a certain way, but how you behave makes all the difference also, because they can't put you into a stereotype. So I'm trying to make them aware that you need to identify with yourself first, and whatever people choose to pick out of that, they'll choose out of your kindness and you being well behaved individual, not just because of the way you look. So I'm really like trying to make sure they're not neglecting one or the other, because they are both. And I want them to start broadening like language. If you can communicate with people better, the type of words you say, you can't speak to everyone the same way. That's cultural. It's not a bad difference. It's just a difference. So the more we're as adults in meet these mixed relationships are giving your children the best of everything and the worst, because that's how you grow, that's how you learn. And you're going to just have people in the world that doesn't want to acknowledge that you're not just this one thing, you're going to be everything. And that's pretty much everyone in the world. There's not this one pure family that's always been and always will be. That's never going to happen. And people need to start just accepting all the beautiful differences that each individual culture brings to the table, like whether it's food, language, eye color, hair color, like these differences are what make everybody individuals, and that's why everybody is beautiful.
Amen, Tasha. Yes, baby.
Hallelujah.
I mean, no, I like that, and I really appreciate, like I was telling Jill, I appreciate the both of you being so open and honest about it. And so then I'll pose this question to everybody. When after hearing what Jill and Tasha said, do you all see, and I'll answer for myself after I put the question out there, but do you all see an issue with the once the kids get a full understanding of what they're being taught at home, like, look, you're mixed. Do you all see an issue with them using it to their advantage? And for me, I would say no, especially the way that the world is. I don't really see an issue with it using it to their advantage. I mean, I know some people may say no, may think that that's wrong, but if it gives you an edge as far as, and I don't mean I guess use it in a superhero term. I don't mean using it like using it for evil and anything like that. But if it comes down to it and you get stopped by the police or something, and it helps get you out of a ticket and things along that. Do you all see an issue with that, with them, potentially using it for their benefit or for using it for that benefit?
I think whatever whatever reprieve, excuse me, that they can receive to their benefit, they should go with it, because I can only imagine the challenges that come along with being of mixed race, because they get it from both sides. You're not white or you're not black enough, so their existence cannot be easy. So whatever reprieve, whatever safe zone they can find, then hey, I'm all for it. I'm all for it, because we know the hell our community can give them at some instances, especially if they speak proper, then you're not black, and that's completely wrong. And I can only imagine what they get from the other side. I don't know what they get from the other side, but I can only imagine the stereotypes, the names that they're being called. So for me, whatever reprieve, whatever safe haven they can afford themselves, they should take advantage of that.
I think also mixed children probably have some backlash from the Black community. I can definitely say they probably will, because of the fact that I'm light-skinned, and I've had backlash from the Black community of assuming that I have a different life just because my skin is lighter, that I'm not, going to be, someone's not going to see me as Black,
Right.
or even a threat, just because my skin is lighter. So I know if I'm experiencing it, who has Black parents, how, someone who might have a parent that's of a different ethnic background will definitely experience it, especially if their skin is of a lighter color than what Black people feel determines your Blackness. Also, me and Jill talk about it all the time. We talk about being in these rooms, in these conversations, because I think a lot of social justice issues are not going to change with everyone being Black, because Black people don't always be in a room for a certain type of conversation. We need people like Jill or children who are exposed to these conversations, these rooms at tables where Black people are not exposed to be able to say, no, that is incorrect, or that stereotype is incorrect. You don't know what you're, talking about, because things and conversations that happen at those tables aren't happening sometimes in front of us. In front of us, it's a whole different type of conversation sometimes, because they want to keep, well, maybe now since Trump is in office, those conversations have become a little bit more, they've become a little more bold. But before, they would keep composure in front of us and then have a whole nother type of conversation when they're in their comfortable setting around everyone who looks like them. So, and I don't put a white or a Black label on it, because it's not just white people that are prejudiced or racist. There's a lot of other ethnic backgrounds that I felt like, okay, wait, why are you acting this way towards me? Somehow you feel you're better than me because I'm Black. So just in general, I think just mixed children having the opportunity to be at tables and educate more on their interaction of having a Black mom or a Black dad, and knowing that culture intimately and being able to express that some of these stereotypes are incorrect.
Yeah, I talk about it a lot. I feel like a lot of dealing with racism has to fall on white people. So, there's a lot of times white people who don't feel, who aren't racist, or who, we all have, to say we're not racist is bullshit. We all, society has taught us all to have some degree of racism, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have to work on not being that. But in those spaces, I think a big issue is that white people who disagree or who aren't racist or who are actively working on their racism that they learn from society don't speak up in those spaces when people do say racist stuff. And I think it's on them. I think they're just as guilty when they don't speak up. Because to me, that's when you make change, where you say it's not okay for you, you wouldn't say that in front of a Black person. It's not okay for you to say it in a space. It's not a safe space for you to say it anywhere. You shouldn't be saying that shit anywhere. So I think it's on white people a lot, instead of just being like awkwardly laughing it off. Because when you awkwardly laugh it off, you're just agreeing with the person. And I think I've seen that a lot of times where people would disagree, but they just go along with the flow instead of calling it out. And it's on them to call it out.
Jill, I think what you're saying is extremely profound, because oftentimes when we have these conversations, like you already said, the tables are segregated. Everyone is speaking in their comfort zone, either with race or culture. Colorism is also a thing. Light skins together, dark skins together, brown skins, how you identify, sexism in the mix, if guys are together or girls are together, elitism, socialism, when you're hanging out with your friends that make this much money versus your friends that make that much money, there's a lot of prejudice, because you're prejudging how you should show up or what to expect from the people that you are socializing with. And it could be a professional socializing setting. It could be a gathering that's actually for a more social purpose. But I think we as a society have learned to conduct ourselves in a certain way based on who's in the audience. And that doesn't allow the honesty that needs to come into the space in order to get to the reality that we're dealing with. One conversation that a darker skin African American would have, or African, or anybody of the dark persuasion in their culture, or in their ethnic group. So for example, one of my very good friends, she's Italian, but she is a darker Italian. And darker means dark hair. She has dark hair and brown eyes, and she talked about different times where she was treated inappropriately by her other Italian families, or even in my instance, the father of my children is African, and so I didn't know I would hear it so profoundly when they were first born around, they kept saying, and it was different people at different times in different spaces, but still African, we're happy to have your color, and at first I was thinking, oh, okay, my complexion, skin tone or something. But no, they were basically saying, we're happy that they're lighter like you, as opposed to darker like their dad. And then over time, I realized that a lot of, it was one eye-opening moment when I was like, my kids are the only dark-skinned kids in all of their social groups. For whatever reason, we just had a whole bunch of light-skinned friends and family around. My kids were always the darkest kids. And they spoke to that one time. They asked if certain relatives in the family were white. I have some relatives in Virginia who are very fair skinned, and we often say, they're the lighter crew. And it's that colorism that really comes into play, and that all of those other things that make conversations difficult when people are not being honest. And that way you can't really deal with how you feel about something or know what's going on the other side of the table, because you really don't know what that conversation is. And people who lead these conversations, so awesome, Jamil, that you are bringing this conversation to a forum. People who lead these conversations usually have political agendas. And when I say political, I don't necessarily mean Democratic, Republican. I mean, like, they can't push the envelope beyond a certain point because they might lose their jobs. So they can only say certain things that are considered politically correct in those settings. And therefore, you never really get to the root of the conversation that's going to bring about the change. So thank you.
I'm one of those firm believers that culturalism should be taught more in school than social studies, because social studies get into a lot of politics and what should be happening and what should be fair and what rights we have. But then your kids are looking on the outside and seeing that when they walk outside that door, that they're not receiving that same type of treatment. And if you teach them culturalism at a young age, even if they're going through certain things in their homes, or they're receiving certain values in their home, even if they're not good values, then they're exposed to culturalism, which is uniting everyone, or figuring out how everyone works. And like Tasha said, the beauty of every individual, because what we face when we walk outside that door, whether you're a male or female that is of African American culture, when you walk outside that door, you have to worry about being discriminated against from Black people and from white or any race. You have to worry about being discriminated against because, like you said, it's the light skin, dark skin thing, or it's even with Hispanics, they're like, well, if you're trying to say a word, that's not how you say it. But when they're learning English and they don't say a word correctly, we don't attack them and say, you're not saying that word properly. You need to say it this way. But if you're trying to say a word in Spanish, then you're being attacked because of the way that you're saying that Spanish word. Then you also have to worry about being blamed first. So if you're in a certain situation and you're out, especially for college students, and you're out there in a certain situation and something might be going on at a party, it's like, okay, well, we're not going to blame this group first because they're lighter or they're of a lighter race. We're going to blame them because they look suspicious. Okay. So even with us, there's not been, and I'm not even going to lie, I'm going to be honest, there's been a time if I see someone that's too close to my house and they're dressed a certain way, my implicit bias kicks in and I'm not even aware of it. Like, oh no, what are they about to do? Why are they close to my house like that? Based on what they're wearing, rather if they had on a suit and tie and they were close to my house, I'm gonna open the door. Yes, can I help you?
Those are the biggest crooks though, but go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was going to say that, like, honestly, those are ones that are like use your social security number and steal your identity. You don't know, it's just like, at some point in time, we all have an implicit bias that we need to be aware of. So I think that they need to teach culturalism a lot more than they teach everything else.
That's a really good point, Kawana. I was actually leaning towards the same thing. The things that you're taught automatically, the things that you carry with you, because you go to school and then you go to college. That is 12, 14, 16 plus years that you're constantly being taught these very narrow-minded, specific points of view from narrow-minded people. So if we're as individuals are sitting down and having these conversations, I feel like in our own friend circle, in our own school circles and work, everything that you do, I think it needs to be brought up that, I was taught that a guy with a hoodie that might be darker complected is probably going to go rob a bank. That is what is building these stereotypes and why people can't feel safe to feel comfortable in sweatpants and Timbs. Like, it's insane to think that somebody that genuinely likes just wearing a specific type of clothes can't be comfortable when that's the whole reason why they put it on in the first place. So if we're not spreading these social stereotypes, because children hear that also. So we're constantly just repeating that cycle. Like, we need to be more than aware. We need to eliminate certain words from our vocabulary when we're referencing people in general, because we need to be aware. Like, we have to be, to just start that wheel of healing and that process of not judging a book by the cover. It's like people say that, but it's not true. It's not referenced all the time because it's not said the same way. So if you're like very specific in these things and unaware, then you're causing a person to become a bigot or starting that stereotype in their brain without them being aware. So we have to be aware as adults and start saying, hey, yeah, I can say whatever I want out of my mouth, but I probably shouldn't. It's like they're more encouraged to speak out, but the things that are being said are what's being damaging to other people. And the more you care about yourself, your surroundings, your family, then you'll start eliminating these words from your vocabulary and other people will start to do the same.
That's true, but I think for a lot of people, and I don't want to say just people of our age range, because I'll just assume that everybody on here is within the same age range. But it starts it starts at the top, meaning, for example, when I first moved to the Washington, D.C. area, one of the jobs I had was working in the government. And one of the things that I always used to hear was, oh, you don't sound like the rest of them. You don't, because of my presence and, you know, I I see myself as or used to see myself as a pretty big guy. I mean, I've been about between 6'3" and 6'2" since I was in the fifth grade. So when people first meet me, I guess because I don't have a smile. I'm always smiling, but I don't talk a lot. And when people see me, they see me as standoffish. So once people get to know me and they hear me and stuff, they go, "Oh, I've heard going for my security clearance check and everything. Oh, well, you don't sound like the rest of them. You speak proper English." And then when I was younger, I heard it all the time. "Oh, you talk like you're white." And for the longest, that used to really piss me off. But once I got, as I got older, I was just like, okay, people are afraid of people that don't sound and look like them. So I get what you're saying about for example, the Tims and the hoodie, because as Kawana said, if I see somebody walking too close to the house, I don't care. And for me, at least, I don't care if it's a black guy, white guy, Hispanic, Asian. If you're too close to my car, you're too close to my house, suit, jeans, I don't care what you got on. My antennas go up right away. But I don't know how, well, I'll put this question out there. How do you think we can move past that, with people judging the book by its cover? Because I'll start it off by saying this. I don't think with the current administration, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, because you have, someone constantly pouring gas on a fire that has been burning for a long time, and it's just the fire's becoming bigger. So do any of you think that we can try to move past that now, or is that going to take some time to kind of work through?
I just want to take a quick stab at that to answer the question directly. Um, it's going to take time. You know, as long as it's taken to build, is as long as it's going to take to, as long as has taken to come into play, it's going to take an extremely equal amount of time or more time to fall out of play. Um, what I did want to answer to your other question that you asked is, how can we? And I guess I'm getting some music in the background to freestyle as I say this.
Yeah, rap.
So 1 2 1 2, I'm gonna tell it to you. No, I think that goes along with it. What we have to do is all of us, and all of us on this call and all of us across, start showing up as we are, because we're partly to blame. When we step into a different environment, we'll change our hair or change our outfit, or, we will assimilate to whatever environment we think will accept us. And yes, that's playing a card that will give us an advantage, but there's a level where you have to say, where's my authenticity, and how do I, speak for who and what I represent, not just because you have pride or not, but to open that door for someone else who may look or sound like you, who won't get the same benefit of the doubt, who now, since you have arrived, now can show up. So something simple as, really, really simple, and I've seen it as of late, is the news reporters, the ladies, the African-American ladies, they started to wear their natural hair and braids and things of that nature. And the fact that in this day and age is still eye-opening to see, a woman with natural hair, or even female sports reporters and things of that nature, and to not show up in that arena, a female sports reporter reporting as a guy would report, but show up as a woman in that setting, or show up as an African-American news reporter. Not that you're going to report the news in Ebonics or rap through it, but you're going to be an authentic African-American. And that makes people say, oh, okay, I've never seen a person of color, or a female or a male in a different setting that's not what is it, authentic to a man. And just being who we are when we show up makes it acceptable for everyone else who can identify with us to show up, because we keep a lot of ourselves away from the public because we're afraid of those judgments that come and those doors that might be closed when we show up. And we have to show up. You have to show up and say, you know what? I'm West Indian. I'm a woman. I'm a mother. You know, there's many women who go for jobs who don't say that they're mothers because they will get discriminated against. There's many people who don't say that they come from any other ethnic group because this is an African American platform rather than a West Indian platform. You know, there's people who have their different sexual identities who don't want to, you know, not that you should walk in there and say what you like to do in your spare time, but we'll keep that quiet because of the judgments that come. So, you know, if you don't show up in your authentic self, you can't expect anybody else to fight your battles for you.
Very good point, Shauna. I agree.
I mean,
And
I think
Tasha.
it'll take nothing. Tasha. I think it'd take nothing short of a revolution almost. White supremacy is not going anywhere without a fight. That's, I mean, it just changes. It just changes. It went from slavery to Jim Crow. Now you have mass incarceration. It just changes the way it works. But I mean, I don't think unless people are, for one, that's one thing I love about the younger generation. I think for a long time, it seems like but when it comes to white supremacy, people try to make these small movements or try to work within it. Like, you know, in the social justice movement, we talk about this. Like, we try to infiltrate law enforcement, right? And try to put our advocates in that space and try to change who they are. And that hasn't worked. And so it's time to get real about the fact that that hasn't worked. And what does that mean? Like, how do we go about changing that? Is it when we talk about defunding? I know people get like, defunding is like a terrible word. It's not like taking away police money and all. It's outsourcing all the stuff that they really shouldn't be handling in any dang way. Or, you know, they shouldn't be over policing certain communities when they're not over policing others. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think what we've done ain't been working. And so it's time to have a real conversation about how do we get something that is going to work. And, you know, sometimes that has to come with a fight.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, like you spoke about the younger generation, they're very impressive because, as Shauna said, they do show up in their authentic selves. They don't stand for any type of prejudice, any type of bias whatsoever. As soon as you say, even as a parent, when you're trying to protect them and you say, hey, you should dress a certain way, or you should talk a certain way, or you should watch out for a certain group of people, they're like, why? They're like, no, like, this is what we're going to do. You can watch out for that. But as far as myself and my peers, we're not standing for that. And they're the ones that are literally in the streets. They're the ones calling for revolution. And they're the ones calling for change. And that's very important. So I love what they're doing. I love the way that they step up and even correct us as adults when we say certain things. You know, even in efforts to protect them, because I sit here and I ask myself the question, like, how do we not, you know, perpetuate these terms when you're dealing with, you know, your children? How do you tell them how to address the stop and frisk or whatever have you, without saying, hey, that side is being prejudiced against you? So in turn, you're introducing them to those very same things we're trying to eliminate. But with them being the younger generation, it's very impressive that they don't even consider any of that when they're talking amongst their peers or when they're moving about in their life. And I think that's what's going to lead to the change. And I hope, you know, that's what leads to the change.
I like the fact that Shauna used the word assimilation. I always, assimilation is good, or its purpose was to be good, right? I moved from the United States and I moved to Europe, and I moved to a part of Europe where they speak French. Well, assimilation is me actually learning French and learning the customs of where I'm at so that I can survive. It was a survival thing, right? Assimilation. However, the United States being a melting pot of so many different cultures coming here, what instead of the main purpose was everyone was supposed to assimilate and be able to work together in this society. But what started happening is that one culture was deemed superior over other cultures, and assimilation moved from the main purpose of survival to, I want to be more like the more dominant culture. I want to be more like the one that seems to be superior. So by doing so, I have to forget my own culture, and I have to adapt completely this culture. And that has turned into not only affecting you as an individual in your immediate household, but now we have people voting against your own culture. And understanding, especially like, I think the main example is when I see people voting to build the wall who are Hispanic. And I'm like, so how did you no longer relate with your own culture any longer enough to say this is entirely incorrect?
Or work in border patrol.
Or work, right. Like we become, assimilation now has created a disconnection between an individual's culture, who they are, and what they feel they need to be in order to survive in this society. So how do we break something like that down where it's generational of us being taught of what is the way for us to survive in this society means forgetting who we are as individuals, and has gotten so bad where we'll turn against, oh, you're acting ratchet, or you're ghetto, or you're not talking, where I can relate to you, because then they might think I am you, but you are, and I have, so it's not just a Hispanic culture. The Black community does it. We just seen it in the Breonna Taylor case in regard to assimilation at its worst, with, assuming the district attorney, assuming that what he was doing was correct, was assimilation, him feeling his political stance, he needed to carry out that case the way he did. And that's why you have people saying like, he's Black on the outside, but he's not Black, and it's just an example of assimilation gone wrong. I do feel that taking away labels, I'm not against with children coming up, because I feel like you're putting them in a very bad place of not being able to understand potentially what's current today. I get that point of being a goal going forward at some point in the future. But if I teach my children, they don't relate with the labels that are being used today, then they don't understand what the fight is to change. I have to explain to them where we are today. Where we are today, we are considered Black or African American, mixed, Asian, whatever the label is today. Do we agree with labels? No. Why? Because it creates division. That's their purpose, right? And these divisions have decided, one of these cultures based on minority versus majority has decided who's superior. So I feel like if you take away labels and not teach your children labels, they're going into a world that is full of them. And then they don't understand which stance to have, whether this is good or bad. And they learn that from the world versus their own home. So I feel like, yeah, they don't have to carry labels. I think they're good. They can have another perception about labels. But I do think that you do have to address the fact that this world is ran on labels, segregating people based on it, and that why these things need to be definitely dismantled. The fact that it's in our educational system, it's in our medical healthcare system, the fact that it's in our criminal justice system. There's many systems that keep society going that is completely founded on labels and who and what is more superior versus inferior based on these labels.
Yeah, Melissa, that's exactly what I was saying about, the conversations you would have with your children in your household, because that's super important. Because like I said, when you step foot out that door, that's what people will see. right off the bat. Like people look first because it's automatic. It's human nature. We judge people based off what we see immediately, but we need to train ourselves and everyone around us that first perception isn't necessarily the best. It's just what's automatic based on how we're taught to live. Everything's a struggle. It's survival of the fittest. And for some reason, the people that's in charge, the people that's in power has made it so that they'll keep it. And that's not how, I guess, things were meant to be. So if we get to a point where it pretty much we're wrestling away the power from the people that are putting these ideas in everybody's head that there is a superior or inferior race. It's like there should be a broader range for people to view and make up their own minds. But instead, there's this one group that's making up everybody's minds for them, and everybody else under them are fighting about, all right, who's going to lead the middle?
I think
Yeah,
white
I agree.
supremacy.
I agree with what you're saying, but then it makes me question, what is the line of disconnect to discern when assimilation has gone wrong or there's a cultural disconnect, you know? Because Melissa, you mentioned like when you assimilate, you would look at, you know, any culture and you might say, oh, that's ghetto or that's ratchet. But what's the line to say that the disconnection isn't appropriate? You know, I mean,
I think
like, what do we teach our children about that? You know, I mean, because being ghetto or being ratchet does exist. And if I don't choose to associate with that or think of that as a part of my culture, am I assimilating to the race that seems superior because that's not what they do? I mean, how do we teach our children that?
I
You
mean,
know?
it's like poor white trash exists, right? But
Yeah.
we're not, like, if I'm talking to somebody who is poor, would be considered poor white trash, it doesn't make me poor white trash. But somehow in the Black community, that's different, right? Like the way it's perceived is different.
Mhm.
And why is that? Like, why would I get a pass where somebody else wouldn't?
I think I was just mainly talking about labels, because Tasha brought up labels at one point in time, and I agreed. I think, you know, we get hung up on these labels, and these labels have been able to perpetuate more and more biases. So in order for us, yes, so I do believe it goes with anything. If something's right versus wrong, you don't do wrong, you do right. So if how they're acting is at some point wrong and you shouldn't be acting that way, then you just don't act that way. But I don't need to label these individuals as being ratchet or whatever the label might be, because now this label is affixed to a race or a culture. And that's the problem. They don't just stop with just a action. They keep going, and now it's affixed to a certain person who looks a certain way. And now we are totally disconnected from how this person looked. They get out of hand. So no, you don't have to say that you have to agree or with anything and everything that your particular culture or any other culture does. I think anything that's right, you do, and anything that's wrong,
Yeah.
you don't. But the labels are definitely very, it's a very...
It's now the labels have a face as opposed to just
Exactly.
being
And
labeled.
it's also the words that you use. Instead of saying ghetto and ratchet, why can't you say appropriate and inappropriate?
Yeah.
Because if you taught it as appropriate and inappropriate, then it doesn't matter what race is doing it. If it's appropriate, it's appropriate. If it's inappropriate, it's inappropriate. But because, like Melissa said, it's fixated on a specific race. Oh, if you say ghetto and ratchet, somebody might automatically think Black.
Yeah, that's typically what happens. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, if you've been teaching it, just like, you know, people have their religious beliefs, right? And you say this is religiously appropriate, but this is inappropriate if you're doing this outside of your religion, or you're not doing something that's religious. They shouldn't label it that way either with religion. You have to teach them appropriate versus inappropriate, then, oh, Christian versus unchristian, Catholic versus uncatholic, ratchet and ghetto, just use the words appropriate and inappropriate. And like you guys said, it starts at home. You start to teach them those types of values at home, and you don't want them to learn certain things outside of the house. So you want to be able to have that open spectrum so that you can talk about everything within the home, so that when they're exposed to it, because like you said, it's how we're viewed. It's not who we are, it's how we're viewed. So when we step out that door, we're viewed in a certain way. So they need to know how we're viewed so that they can make change. So I totally agree with that, because you have to know what you're fighting against. You have to know what you're up against. So teach them appropriate versus inappropriate instead of ghetto and ratchet. I have heard it several times. Oh, you ratchet when you this place, but when you go to work, are you supposed to be inappropriate when you go to work? I'm just trying to figure out, are we supposed to be inappropriate when we in the workplace? But when
no, but you know, we just seen it actually on the vice president debate. On the vice president debate, when he had mentioned about the judge that they're thinking about bringing to the bench, that her being against Roe versus Wade, how religion got into it was all of a sudden because someone is for Roe versus Wade, they must not be for pro-life, because to be for pro-life means you're against Roe versus Wade, and it's all a label, pro-life, right? This is a label now. So now if I'm not Christian, I'm not pro-life, or if I think a woman should have a choice, I'm not pro-life.
Yeah. So I would say then it's less of a cultural disconnect, more of a like mislabeling, or, you know.
I mean, yeah, I think it's done on purpose, right? You divide and conquer.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. This was actually a really good example, like my, I guess, verbiage and what I was trying to explain, and then Melissa's breakdown of what she heard, and then Shauna chiming in as well. And then Kwana kind of brought bits and pieces of what everyone was saying, pretty much about the same thing, but to a point where I feel like everyone understood and realized that they agreed. It's like, it's just the words that people use make the biggest difference. And I feel like the people that are the leaders of the country need to be able to do what Kawana just did. Like, make it so that this whole group understands that even though what you're saying sounds different, you mean the same thing. So bringing everybody together in that sense can calm the storm. It's like, yeah, we don't agree on every single point, and that's not what you're after. It's more of like a common view and the end goal.
I wanted to add to that too, Tasha.
No, that's you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jamel.
No. Go ahead.
No, I wanted to go back to answering your question too. And I think one of the things that answers your question is we are blessed to be parents. And so, that's one commonality that everyone on this line has. And in that respect, we each have children that we can help to develop to make a difference in the future. Some of the people who are sitting in positions saying certain things, hopefully after their platform is removed, their voice is removed, but our voice carries on because we are parents, and we instill our values, and we serve as role models, et cetera, to what our children will be doing when they grow older, and how they will be leading, and how they will be the change. So, oftentimes in our other roles, a lot of us work with children, and I work with family engagement, and just having a conversation around this in the family engagement setting, and how you are deliberate about what you communicate to your child is a key factor, that goes beyond what we can do in our day-to-day. We can instill it in our children so that they can take it into their children. And that's a part, of that big revolution that Jill was referring to, about being a part of the change.
No, I was just going to say before that, I think, and please let me know, if you disagree or if you see it another way, but I think that we spend, and I want to say as parents and as a society or the world period, is that I think we spend so much time teaching our kids what not to be proud of versus what to be proud of. Meaning, we spend so much time saying, hey, look, when you go outside, you can't don't talk like this, don't dress like this, versus telling them or teaching them, hey, look, this is how you should dress, or this is how you should act. And I don't think it's so much of us doing it intentionally. I think it's the fear in us by saying, if you act this way, this is going to happen to you. So we spend so much time feeding or acting on that fear versus saying, look, for example, trying to think, like growing up, I played baseball growing up. And like I said, I've been the same height I am now since the 5th grade. And the only thing I was constantly told is, hey, it's not a lot of black people don't play baseball. You should be playing basketball. Instead of them feeding me, telling me, hey, look, you'd be great. You're doing good at baseball. You should stick to this. I think we do the same thing as parents, saying, when you go out there, don't do this, instead of telling them, no, this is what you should be proud of this. Like being an individual, for the people on here that know me, I know I can be I can be a bit much for people that don't know me. But for the people that know me, no, I'm not coming at it from a place of any bad intent or anything. It's just who I am. I think if we spent more time teaching our kids to be proud of who and what they are versus telling them what they shouldn't be and who they shouldn't be like, I think that would, start to lead to a change in things. Anybody agree or disagree with that?
I totally agree, because so much, especially Black children, so much of who we are is always being purchased by everyone else. So absolutely encourage your children to be who they are.
Like I said before, I think that's the beauty of our young people today. They even question what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. If you tell them something is inappropriate, they're gonna be like, why? Why do you think that is inappropriate? Oh, because you put a label on it, it's inappropriate. But now you have to explain to me why that's appropriate and why this is inappropriate. So they're breaking down all labels of society all on their own. Just because you feel or because you grew up a certain way does not mean that that's right or that's wrong. And I think that's beautiful. Like, one shocking example of it, one of my friend's daughters, she said that she would date a guy who considers himself gay if he decides that he likes her. And we're all clutching our pearls like, what? And then she's like, well, explain to me why you guys think that's inappropriate. And we're all still clutching our pearls like, oh my God. But really and truly, they're actively and truly breaking down everything that's labeled or something that's going to make them feel like they're less than, which is very important for change, as radical as it is, or we accept it or not.
And I always talk about Christianity, and we are taught, sometimes they're the most judgmental people, but the Bible tells us not to condemn and to love all,
right,
and to make sure that, yes, we preach the gospel, but if she wants to date someone that's gay, isn't that her helping to preach the gospel and loving someone no matter who they are, and not condemning that person and not judging that person and trying to lead that person to the right direction? Is that not the same thing? But like you said, the first reaction that we have, what? The meeting? No. It's just like, what is going on? And the same thing for what Jamil said. He said, we're so busy teaching them what not to do, but that's a natural instinct when it comes to the protection of your kids. So you're naturally going to be like, oh, please don't, because the only thing you're thinking about is protecting your kids from the outside world. But if they're not exposed to what the outside world is going to do to them or can do to them, then we lost all the protection anyway. So it's just like, how do we start teaching them? So now we need to, this is what you should be proud of. Don't be ashamed of who you are. Don't be ashamed of what you do. Make sure you love everyone, involve everyone, understand their culture. If you don't understand their culture, then ask them. Don't make a judgment about their culture. Because a lot of times, like, you eat this? Ew. Like, what is this?
Don't knock it till you try it.
Right. Don't knock it. And I'm one of those people that will try to eat anything. Right. I'm going to try a different food from because you never know what that culture would bring to you as an individual, or the type of person that it will make you, or the type of things that you can experience. And you're going to lose out on experience because of an internal judgment.
Right.
Yep. And that makes us blessed as parents because just, as you guys were sharing earlier, our parents, our children expose us to things in a different light. They are remnants of us, different personalities of us in different forms melded together. And then we get to see ourselves through their eyes. And we're like, wow, I didn't know I felt this way, or I didn't know that I had this judgment of people, or they will definitely call you out and make you reevaluate how you see things. And so I think a key thing, like Sherwin alluded to, is really listening to what they're telling us. I mean, I can go down just a list of different things that go from racial identity to sexuality to social classism, to everything that my children are like, Mommy, you do that? And I'm like, wait a minute. I thought that I was a very, open, liberal, inclusive person, but through the eyes of my children who've been exposed to much more than I was as a child, they are able to see areas where, you know what, I could be a part of the problem and not so much a part of the solution. And that willingness to accept that and, be proactive in broadening my thinking is a part of another aspect of getting to the solution behind these huge problems.
Right. We perpetuate that. Like, even just thinking about it within my own self, like, I'm so proud of my children for who they are because of, the progress that they've made, socially. I pulled up to my daughter's school and she's hanging out with two sisters who are Muslim and they're wearing hijabs. And I'm thinking in my mind, are you crazy? Like you're gonna be labeled, you're gonna be judged as such and such. But then I had to stop and have to think about that. Like, wow, that's real progressive. That's real courageous that you don't care what anybody thinks. These are my friends. This is who I'm gonna hang out with. And if you have a problem with that, something is wrong with you. And that's so pure and so natural. I had to step back and say to myself, who grew up in a time of extreme bullying was the way. And now these kids are like, no, that's not cool. Bullying is not the way. If you bully, you're out of school, you're this, you're that. Bullying is the wrong thing to be absent. And they believe it to their heart, And I'm like, wow, I wish I grew up like that. But no, I grew up judging and being judged. And I would have never hung out with any kid that was Muslim or looked Muslim or walked around like that or just was plain old different than I was, and that is beautiful to me. That's amazing that, they're teaching us. And that's just honest.
Just the fact that you notice that makes a huge difference as a parent. It's like being open, Sean, and like you're listening to what they're saying. Because our parents, their parents before them, they probably beat you. Honestly. Like, shut the hell up. Like, really. And we're that generation that's getting to the point where we're like, I'm not going to be like my mom. I'm not going to shut her down for telling me that she want to wear a mini skirt and some heels. I'm not going to be like, no, you can't do that to your kids these days. Because you know what? We're going to go out and do it anyway. So you know that your child's going to go out and do it anyway. You have to listen to them, be open, be accepting to what they're saying. Because they really make way more sense than we ever have. It's like, you got a point. Why am I even addressing the fact that she has on a hijab? It's actually kind of
cute. Yeah, with the internet, they're just exposed to so much more. Like they have the world at their fingertips. We had Encyclopedia Britannica.
Britannica.
I mean, and instead of saying you wearing a mini skirt and some heels is wrong, say, well, just know that no matter what you're wearing, you should be respected and you shouldn't allow anyone to treat you a certain way because you have this on. Exactly. Now, I'm going to be honest. If I go out and I'm having a good time, I'm going to wear a certain type of dress. And my sons are like, what you got on, mommy? Like, why are you walking out the house looking? I have an 8-year-old that thinks he's my daddy. why are you walking out the house looking like that? And not knowing that it's actually a compliment, but it's just like, okay, well, what do I teach him to say? Well, mommy wants to look sexy while I'm going out on date night with daddy. When you're older, you'll have a wife and you guys want to look like that too, so that you guys can really be able to experience and enjoy each other. Of course, you can't tell him that while he's 8. But, when he gets to a certain age, it's just like, yeah, that's why we do it. Mommy and daddy want to look good when we go out for date night, because we spend a lot of time in the house, or doing adult things that take away from the actual joys of being in a relationship outside of your children or household responsibilities. So when we get to do this, we do it up, so it's just like, teach them that you should be respected no matter what, instead of don't do this, because they're going to see it. They're going to see it happening. And if especially a young Black woman, if you teach them to be independent and strong, because me growing up, males already had this independent thing, or this dominance that, okay, I'm a male and I'm a Black male and I got to do what I have to do, because that's what, especially if you're coming from a single mother, my mama told me this is what I have to do to be a Black male. But with a female, if you teach them independence and strength, they will know their worth. They will know how they should be respected, and it will be out there in the world. So when someone comes up to them, even their look, the demeanor of a young Black woman or a woman, period, like, I'm not going to take this stuff. I'm not, I'm going to be respected, and we are equals, and we just, we're supposed to love each other, and we're going to do these types of things together. But, a lot of the times, especially me growing up, I just saw a single mother, or rather a single grandmother, taking care of her children's kids. And it's just like, cook, clean, do this, do that, make sure you do this as a woman. But it also taught me a lot of independency. So
I think age was a good thing you brought up. When do we have these conversations? Is there a perfect age where we say these conversations start here? I think I kind of tussle with that. Sometimes I feel with my 18-year-old, I started conversations a little later than I feel I should have. And now looking back at my 12-year-old coming up, saying maybe I need to start these conversations earlier, because I didn't, some of these things happen, and I was being, instead of preventative, I was being, reactive, because I missed the ball and she had to experience something outside, and then I had to fix everything. But knowing that children are individuals, like as parents and other moms on this call and dads, do you guys think there's a perfect age to bring up conversation about what's going on in the world, or about dating, or anything that we feel outside of our own homes that we need to address? I know as a mom, that's something I'm still trying to figure out, with 2 younger kids coming up and seeing mistakes. I wouldn't really say mistakes, because my oldest is fine, but more or less just saying I probably wouldn't have did that if I would have known in hindsight, so does anyone have advice on that?
I don't even know.
I have some advice
I was
on
in
that.
first grade.
Well, we all do.
Yeah.
Whoa, somebody open the door.
All right.
My mother started
Let me say this. Let me say this before somebody answers. Mel, I'm gonna just say you peeking over my shoulder at my notes, because that was my next
Sorry.
question. But no, you good. But I would just want to add into that. But on top of what Melissa said, knowing that you said all of our kids are individuals, is there a right or wrong time to have that conversation? Because you all know, like with our, with mine and Kawana, with our boys, their personalities are completely different. So, with my oldest, he's as quiet as can be, quieter than I am. But my middle son, he's our middle son, excuse me. He's quiet also, but he's at that age where, like, all right, we might need to have that conversation. Then the 8-year-old, we feel that, all right, he's still young, but seeing how these kids have so much, have so many avenues to get this information from, is there a right or wrong time to have that conversation, or wrong age to have that conversation with them?
I don't know.
Well,
Mommy started early. I was probably the only kid in first grade that didn't want to get pregnant, because I would get kicked out of my house. So I don't know.
So there's a great, answer to that. It's just like what we've demonstrated just in this brief conversation is that our children have different entry points of understanding and they're all individuals. And our job, is to really think about what is it that they're asking and to what degree that they could understand it. We don't want to unload a whole, biology conversation on them and what it means to look sexy, of course, but we could give them some context because once they've piqued interest in the subject matter, they then do go off and try to explore and find understanding on their own. So the best
And
thing
most
we can
times
do
before
is
we go, they've piqued interest.
exactly. So as soon as they show us that they know something, engaging them first and asking, well, tell me what you know about sexy, or why do you think mommy is wearing this outfit? Because I've had students come to me and say, oh, they're having sex. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a second grader. They're talking about having sex. And they're really talking about the kids holding hands, but because they don't have any language and they know it's all connected, they go there. So really, thinking about where are they with their entry of that conversation and how can I listen to what they know, and then just add a little bit more to give them some context and know that this is a conversation that I have to continue with them as they grow and develop.
Sort of like the continuous why that we learn at work. Why do you think this? Well, tell me why you think that. Well, tell me why you see this, or help me understand. So keep continuously asking them questions so that they can come up with their own conclusion. I know I'm the queen of random. Jamil was taking the kids to the pumpkin patch and my 14-year-old was on the stairs and I pulled him to the side really quick and I was like, should we start buying you condoms? And he's like, what? I'm going to the pumpkin patch. And I was like, I don't know what's the right time to ask you, should we start buying you condoms? But I felt since you were headed out the door, it might be something that you're going to think about and then ask your father questions about. And he's like, why is my mom like this? But then he's like, okay, well, I can understand because,
I would say unless it's an American type situation, I don't think before he goes to the pumpkin patch that,
It's like, when is the right time to bring it up? Because if I would have went in his room and closed the door, he probably would have thought something was wrong, or I suspected something of him. So if I would have went in the room and closed the door, and I'm like, well, what have you heard? Like, why are you coming in here asking me this? Instead of like, oh, let me just randomly ask, hey, should we start buying you condoms? I'm going to make it casual. That's just the type of mother that I want to be. Let me make it casual. Let me ask you right now. Should I start buying you condoms? No. Okay, go ahead. Go to the pumpkin patch. We'll talk about it later.
Yeah, I think Shauna hit the nail right on the head. Like, as soon as they become inquisitive, that's the time you need to have those conversations for real. And like, even if they're close in age, like my two younger ones are, if the older of the two younger ones start questioning, I feel like, we should have to talk to both of them, at the same time, because myself and my brother were close in age as well. And whatever he was experiencing, I was experiencing, because we were only 18 months apart. So whatever he said and did, like, we were all in together. So you got to lump them all in together if that's the case, and if that is the scenario that's going on in your household. Because as soon as they start asking, you got to start telling, or you start seeing the signs or the warning signs that, hey, they have questions, and you have to go in.
Because they have so much access now, right? So if you don't answer that question, they're gonna go find that answer. Mm-hmm. It might not be the answer that's right? Mm-hmm. Like back in our day, you looked at your dad's Playboy. Now you can go on RedTube and watch. They have access to so much more stuff than we did. Yeah. So they're gonna go searching if you don't, provide those answers.
Yeah. And you got to keep it light. You got to keep it light. You got to have that open door policy when it comes to them and their questions that they can continuously come to you. Like my oldest, she tells me about her situations and her relationships more than I want to know. I'm like, what? like, you shouldn't have said that one. Like you could have left that whole part out. Like, I did not want to know that. And it's continuous too. And I gotta hide the shock on my family. Like, whole snap, code red. Like, but it's cool. I'd rather she gets the information from me than out there in the street or Google or whatever the case may be. and she'll get the real from me no matter what.
So
I
thank
think
God.
out of all my talks that I've had with my children so far, I think the hardest part is dealing with social injustice. Surprisingly enough, not because I'm uncomfortable talking about it, because I'm not, but I think for me is drawing that line of making sure they understand, especially talking about with police per se, making sure they understand me saying what's going on with law enforcement and brown and black children or adults doesn't mean that you can't seek help from law enforcement. And I think that has been the hardest line of, because as an adult, I've had many interactions. I work with law enforcement. There are some officers I work with that, we are chum, and I would never think they would do what I see done on TV. And then that is happening, throughout. But my kids have not had interactions. They only know what they are being told, either through TV or through their parents or other adult interaction that speak to my children. So how do I address without giving them this nasty connotation about the law enforcement, but then also allowing them to understand what's going on with these cases that are happening time in and time after dealing with law enforcement.
Hey, Angie, can you unmute yourself now?
Yeah.
She works in a prison, and she works as a counselor. I don't know if she can unmute herself. She has some issues with doing that.
Man, that's crazy.
But I think that's, for me, been like really, the conversation that I, even especially with me now having also my son coming up who's now 10, of having to make that decision. When is it completely necessary to have these conversations? Is it when he starts driving, or is it when he's old enough to roam without me? When do I have this conversation? And then how do I not give him this? Because I've seen kids in the street have this bitterness in regard to law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like whether and sometimes it deals with a certain race of law enforcement, and sometimes it deals with all law enforcement, calling them names, totally just disrespectful towards law enforcement. And I'm like wondering, is it because of the type of conversations that have been had around you? Or is it because the only thing you see that deals with law enforcement and people that look like you is on the news with someone dead? Like what is creating this space? And then how do I manage this space? Because I do want my son to know this is what you might be, unfortunately faced with dealing with law enforcement, but also understanding that there are police officers, sheriffs, probation officer, whoever within law enforcement that do their job and don't have these same issues as these other ones, that are doing what they're doing in society.
But I think that's on law enforcement though. I mean, as kids, when you growing up, that's on them. As kids growing up, we used to think that, hey, those are the good guys. Mm-hmm. Those are until you get to like the 5th grade, you're about 10 years old, those are the good guys. But when you start hanging out with your friends in the street, you learn otherwise. You're like, oh, wait a minute. Why did he call me that name? Why he threw me up against the fence? Why did he search me, without probable cause? They start to teach us that, so it's on them now, to me, to start reversing that. They need to get back into the schools. They need to be having conversations with children from elementary school on up to high school and beyond, to make sure that, in the communities that they police, that they understand that they are the good guys. But too many times they're keeping themselves silent. Too many times they're justifying what their fellow police officer is doing. Mm-hmm. And that is not allowing for a good conversation when you get to adolescent ages, 16, 17, 18 years old and beyond. And they're like, man, you know what? Police, they're not what we thought they were. And in fact, I'm fearful of them. And in fact, what I'm seeing on TV, which is divisive in itself, and media is going to perpetrate whatever they want to perpetrate for the narrative, then you're going to have a story out there that may not be true or may be true. But at the end of at the end of the day, they're fearful.
And you know, me and Melissa talked about this before. I was stalked by an officer, as a woman, you know, because he wanted to date me and I was dating someone else. And I went and spoke to superiors, and it was still like nothing was done, right? I had to like move from the town because there's this whole, they just hold each other's back, and that has to change. Like, you have to be willing to call out somebody else when they're wrong.
It's a live by the code type thing, and it's not only in the streets, it's in law enforcement too. And then they're also playing into politics and the media, so they don't want to make a difference because they don't want anyone to see them as breaking the code. When I was younger, police officers used to be in our school playing basketball with us, or cheering, cheering for the cheerleaders. So they're like, yeah, go ahead and do your thing. Or they would speak at our assemblies. You don't see a lot of that anymore because the police officers nowadays are playing into the media and into politics. So they have to keep up a certain type of image too, or be viewed a certain way too. And if they are viewed as violating the code, then they get cast out.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and this may just be my opinion, or it's just my opinion. I think what ends up happening is that a lot of times there isn't enough information given, or I think, let's say at home, I think we fear giving our kids too much information. Like, for like you said, for example, like growing up, sometimes you would know the cops, that walked your beat or walked your neighborhood and stuff. But nowadays, they don't give out that information, or you won't see the same officer over and over. I think as far as at home goes, we fear giving our kids too much information for fear that they may not be able to comprehend, the information that we're giving them. And I look at it as just as the same as sex. Each child is different, so you have to approach the information that you're giving them depending on that child. Some kids are more mature. You can give them a lot of that information of how to act and how to, interact with police. Some kids, you have to kind of spoon feed it to them, give it to them slow and say, okay, this is this and this is that. But I think it all has to do with the amount of information that we're afraid to give our kids. Because I think if we give them too much information, you'll have, and excuse my French on this one, you might turn your child into one of these woke idiots that I think you have the people that are so woke they don't know which way is which. They're just angry, and they hate all cops. All cops aren't bad. You do have your good cops, like you said, the cops who used to come to the assembly and stuff like that. Now you don't see the cops, or you don't know the cops. The cops don't know the neighborhood. And I'm not taking it from the standpoint of where, the cop should be somebody from the neighborhood. I totally disagree with that, because I think you run into so many issues if you're going to take, like in Patterson, where I'm from. I don't think that somebody that lives directly or a block over from my neighborhood should be patrolling my neighborhood. I think you run into too many issues with things like that. But I think that's where the disconnect is not having enough information, and then also not having police or that know what's going on in the area.
If I was a police officer in this climate, I think a good cop,
Mhm.
I would be thoroughly offended. Like I'll go out my way to make it known that, hey, it's not all of us, but to hide behind the blue veil, it's unacceptable. You only see them few and far in between, just stepping up and stepping out and showing, hey, that we're not all the same. We're not. Maybe during a routine traffic stop, you may see some that you can tell, when you roll down your window, they're like, oh, let me be buddy. Let me, kind of warm up this situation because I already know that this person is already tense.
Mhm.
Maybe in that situation, but just being in law enforcement, period, I'd be thoroughly offended if I was a good cop. And I would definitely step up, and I'd definitely be saying, hey, we need to be in the community more and showing that we're here to protect. We're not here to destroy. And that's on them. That's on them, especially if you police in a neighborhood full of children that look like you. or even if you just care, even if you're just, empathetic to just the cause of what's going on in the climate that's happening right now.
I think too, when you talk about decriminalizing certain stuff, right? So like certain stuff, you're criminalized for certain stuff that, like when we talk about drug use, should that be criminalized even?
Good point.
Is that hurting some? I mean, obviously it's hurting yourself, but I think we really need to think about how we criminalize nonviolent offenses.
Especially, that has been right the what has created mass incarceration at this point, and why I think at the time Shauna had mentioned about role models. When you're dealing with drugs, and then you're dealing with mass incarceration, you're also talking about all the different role models, all the different father figures taken out of that, out of the community. You're also looked at how many interactions that these children are having that are negative, that they're seeing with interactions with the police so early, because they're seeing their dad get arrested, uncles get arrested, older siblings get arrested, and then they're seeing their interaction with anything with law enforcement or the criminal justice system is all completely negative. So it perpetuates a system of more and more going into this negative system that they don't even understand how they're getting in. And it's very, very early. I think that in order to stop that, you're going to have to look at really doing what they're talking about, dismantling the police, because of the fact that I believe they're handling things they have no understanding of. And having social workers, like I've heard when I was reading into doing that, I like the idea of them having social workers come with them out on domestic calls. We see it in our, industry, Joe, where, that might be the difference for our victims, having someone who is physically understanding. Because a lot of people think the police are trained to deal with everything, but they're not. They're trained to deal with crimes and crime only. And sometimes when they report, it's someone there with mental health. And they're not choosing to be violent, but there's something more going on. And all they see is the violence. That's all they see. Or sometimes they show up and this is an abusive relationship, or this is an abusive situation going on. And all they're doing is, take a walk. Like that's really going to solve something. Or, they're not trained. They're really not trained to deal with these things. And to say that, we're going to give them training, it never happens. There's agencies just like the agency me and Jill work for that has been trying to train police officers. It's just too much. I think they need to put a lot of the funding into bringing in different types of people who can help the police deal with these types of situations where they don't have to lead to jail.
Yeah, that's a good point, Melissa. The age range for talking to your kids about it, like Shauna said, it's case by case, and with the job, I feel like that remains the same. If the person went into a police field, then that was the type of job that they're interested in, and I feel like it's not their job to be necessarily trained. I think they should be able to recognize when this person might need like a mental caseworker or some therapy or something to help in making sure that they're brought in safely and effectively. Like, I feel like, again, this stems from people in power saying like, okay, this one person needs to do all of these jobs, and that's not healthy for the officer as well as the people that may get into these altercations, and the cops are called when they were maybe strung out on a drug addiction at that point. It's like we need to have a broader range of the idea of whose job it is to be brought in for these individuals. And it's like when everybody's calling 911, somebody should have a number available to call somebody else. there's too many people doing too many jobs and train in half of it. It's like you learn 20% of all of these things when you just need this one person to be good at this 100%. So I feel like if you fix that main problem about like even having that number to call, like, hey, I need you to come pick up blah blah blah. The police shouldn't even be called at that point, because it's like I can clearly tell you're strung out on something and we need to call a facility to come and get them so they can get the help that they need. So we need more programs and more people thinking about that separation and caring enough to put that stuff in place.
Yeah, it's sort of like teaching. For
Yeah, I
instance,
was just about to say that. Yeah.
yeah, we know, like, okay, if you keep on switching us from content to content, then we're never going to develop the skill in the specific content that we were originally teaching, which means it's a barrier for our students, because in that case, we can't teach them something that we don't have enough quality to teach, because we've been switched to a different content. Now, police are there for protection. Okay, so say for instance, you did call in a social worker or you called an institution, there's still a chance that someone may get violent, right? So they need to know how to use physical tactics without harming someone as much as they do, and be able to get them to a point where these other departments or these other jobs can then step in and say, hey, let's take you to this place so that we can talk about it, or let's see what resources that you need, or let's even get you hooked up with a specific person that you can call on a daily basis that you can talk to.
Yeah, make it required. Like teachers were mandated reporters. If a child comes in and it's clear that they've been abused, it's not our job to go and investigate. It is our job to call social services.
Yep.
Right.
You know, and like it's really our job, because you can get fired if you do not report suspected abuse. So make it mandatory as opposed to being trained in every single thing. Make it mandatory to report, you know.
And give people a chance to be rehabilitated. Throwing them in jail is not necessarily the answer. So if you have someone
99.9%.
exactly, it's not the answer, but now you're putting them into this incarceration system, and now this is all they know. So now the only thing they know is fight or flight, and even when they return to society, it's like, well, I gotta sell drugs because I can't get a job, I can't vote, nothing I do matters, people are going to look at me like I'm nothing because I haven't been given the proper rehabilitation. So what's the point of having rehabilitation if you're not going to do that?
But
And we've seen it in the world today is viewed as, oh, a Caucasian child shoots up a school and they need help.
And that speaks to systems and conditioning. You know,
Right.
I mean, that's another topic, but you know, how much how much help does the system want these people to get? You know, it's more lucrative to have them in prisons or so and so. So that makes a whole other topic. Yeah.
But I think part of it, and it goes back to something that
I looking at your notes too?
Huh?
I was trying.
No. I'm gonna wrap up in a little bit because we're on 2 hours now.
Good conversation.
No. That's why I said I prefer to flow naturally.
That's what happens.
It even goes back to what we said earlier about not giving them enough information, because once they like you found out on the episode that I did with Iron Money Fitness, is that a lot of times you can get your voting rights and things back. They choose not to give them that information when they're released, like I said, in the hopes that they'll become beat down to the point to where they're just going to go back out there and commit either the same crime or another crime, and like I said, end up right back in the system because it is so lucrative for just like I said on the last episode, for those that have the private prison, Michael Jordan and a couple of other people that have that put into private prisons. And that's why they don't give them the information. Like I said, lack of information is what drives, I think, a good amount of everything that's wrong in our society, from our kids to law enforcement and everything. Because I give an example of one time, where I was stopped by the police and I was in full uniform and the cop stopped me, drew his gun on me and everything. And the reason that all of that went down was the dispatcher didn't give them all of the information. Now it was the wrong vehicle and everything, but because he didn't have the proper information, that situation could have turned out horrible for him.
Mm.
So, but like I said, it's all about, the amount of information and what information they want you to have.
Yep.
Before I wrap up, anybody have anything else they want to, like I said, we can go on, a little longer.
They're like, no.
Got anything,
I need to
chime in
eat.
or throw in there, please, by all means, go right ahead.
Well, I just want to thank you for having us on the show, even though I'm your wife and you should have invited me a long time ago. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But no, I think that what you're doing is a great thing and that it is bringing forth a lot of issues that we all need to be able to discuss with each other, adults as well as children. The children are growing up and they're learning and it's a new generation, but sometimes adults need to hear these things to realize who they are and the things that they're doing as well, even if they're set in their own ways. It's always good to have these types of conversations so that they can be aware.
Yep. You hit the nail on the head. Like we say on our conferences all the time, it's all about the dedication. It's all about the commitment of showing up to things like this. And that's the only way things change. The only way. And we got to keep doing it. And we got to keep having these conversations. And we got to keep bringing more people in. And even professionals, law enforcement, counselors, all of the above. And really, really get down to the nitty gritty and the crust of this whole situation that we faced in right now with social injustice.
Anything, Mel, Gasti, Jill, anything in closing?
No, thank you for having me.
I'm
I'm ready to eat.
Yeah, we're all there with you. No, but Jill, I do appreciate you coming on and being so open and frank with the room. Like I said, anytime we have an episode, you're more than welcome to come back. It's not only a male-dominated show. It's just so hard to get a group of women on at the same time. So
I had a comment.
Go right ahead, ma'am. Go right ahead.
Nonsense, violence, not a good policy. Therefore, we must not like.
Was that self-destruction?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that self-destruction you're quoting there?
But,
No, I don't have a comment.
But I do really appreciate you all coming on, and like I said, getting to the more, like Sherman said, the more guests that come on with us, the more people get to see exactly what it is, and just know that we're not just on here, talking shit. So it's it is good conversation, just like the title says. We need to talk. So I really, really do appreciate everybody coming on and being as open and honest as possible. So we will do this again, and hopefully next time we can have a mixed, more males on the call than just Sherwin and I. We had Neil earlier and Kenny, but I know Sunday football is on, so on
Competition.
All right. Appreciate y'all.
Appreciate y'all. Everybody stay safe. Enjoy the rest of your.
Bye.
Always a pleasure. Love you all.
Love you all. Be safe.
Love you all.
Love you all. Bye.
You guys.
Bye bye.